Hey, this is Art from My New Microphone, and today I would like to discuss one of the best ways to reach our goals in the mix. And that way is by using reference tracks. A reference track is a recording that we can reference our mix against as we go through the mixing stage and even as we are referencing our own mixes outside of the studio. Reference mixes are typically commercially released, mixed and mastered songs in a similar style or genre or mix aesthetic that we are working toward in our own mixes. By referencing our own mixes against a reference mix as we go through the mixing process, we can set a sort of goalpost to work toward in our own work. When choosing a reference mix for our own mixes, it's important to choose something that we are both familiar with and fits in the style or genre of the mix that we are working on. Remember that a reference mix is a sort of goalpost that we are working toward in our own mix. Choosing a reference track that you are very familiar with, having listened to it in multiple different systems and listening environments, is a great idea to give you a better sense of the goalpost that we are working toward. And it's important in the digital realm to choose a reference mix that is in a lossless file format, such as FLAC or WAV, and has all of the information that we need to reference. Lossy formats such as MP3 actually remove data from the digital audio and make for imperfect reference tracks. So whenever possible, please use FLAC, WAV, or another lossless format. There are a few different strategies when it comes to actually referencing our reference mixes while we are mixing. I'm going to show you my preferred way momentarily when we hop into the digital audio workstation, but I'd like to just ramble off a few different techniques that we can use to actually reference the reference tracks in our mix session. The first strategy is to actually import the reference track directly into our mix session and ensure that the mix that we are working on is being sent to a separate mix bus and the reference track is being outputted another way. That way, the reference track is not being processed by any mix bus processing that we are using in our mix, and we can rapidly toggle between our mix bus and the reference track. Another strategy could be to have the reference mix in a completely different playback software than the digital audio workstation we are using. However, A/Bing becomes a little less efficient in this setup where we would have to stop the playback in the mix session, open up the software and play back the reference, and then stop the reference and open back up the mix software. This takes up valuable time, especially when our ears adjust so quickly to whatever it is we are listening to at the moment. The third option, which is my favorite, is to use a dedicated plugin or software for your A/B testing against the reference mix within the mix session. I will show you my preferred plugin momentarily when we hop into Logic Pro, but there are plenty of different options out there on the market. Regardless of the option we choose, when it comes time to reference our mix against the reference track, it can be valuable to line up the points of high energy between the reference and our mix along with the points of low energy so that they match up. This way, we are not only referencing the sonics of the mix, but we are also referencing the energy levels throughout the mix. All right, with that, let's hop into Logic Pro and I will show you how I personally go about using reference mixes in my mixes. All right, so here we are inside of Logic Pro, and I just want to quickly show you how I would go about using a reference mix in my mix session. So here we have a initial rough mix of one of my songs. I've done gain staging, and then we went through and just did a rough mix with faders and pan pots here. So now is a great time to choose a reference track that would suit the song and work toward that as we start introducing processors and really refining the mix. Now, this song here is kind of a rock style song. It's a bit slower. We can have a listen right here.
Wasting all my spare time trying to reach you.
So that's the rough mix. I would want to go out and choose a song that has a similar vibe, a similar style and genre to this song that has been commercially released. I would look for something that has been mixed and mastered by professionals that have a lot of experience and something that really sounds great to me. And oftentimes it's great to choose something that sounds great to a lot of other people and that is relatively popular in the realm of music. So with that, I'm not going to actually bring in somebody else's song for this example of using a reference track. I'm not really interested in getting any copyright strikes here on YouTube, but I will show you how I would go about bringing in a reference track and then A being that reference track against the mix that we are working on. So to show you how I bring in my reference mixes directly into my mixing sessions, we'll go here to the mix bus. In this case, it's the stereo out in Logic Pro, and we are going to insert reference to by mastering the mix. This is my preferred plugin. I highly recommend it. I'll actually drop a link in the description box below for you to check it out yourself. And what we would want to do here, if we had other inserts or processors on the mix bus, say an EQ and a compressor, we would want to put this reference plugin after these other inserts right here to ensure that the mix that we're working on is actually going through the mix bus processing before hitting the reference. And on the other hand, that the reference mix that we are choosing to use is not passing through these mix bus processors before getting to the ultimate output of the mix session. So as mentioned earlier, I'm not going to bring in another song to reference this mix again. Rather, I'm going to bring in the final mix of the song that we are working on. So right here we have the reference mix, and we can toggle between the original track right here, which is what we are working on, and the reference by just clicking back and forth through these buttons right here. We have Trinity display right here, which will show the level lines or the differences in frequency content between the original and the reference mix. We'll have punch dots, which basically show the punchiness, stereo width, which shows the stereo width at each frequency along the, well, below 20 and above 20,000 hertz. And finally, we have the auto scale, which will automatically switch these parameters right here. We can go +5 to -5 dB, +10 to -10, 15 to -15, 20 to -20, or reset to 5. So auto scale would do that automatically, but we can also manually do this here. There's a lot more that goes into this reference plugin, but I just wanted to show you the basics here. So what we can do is play back and toggle between.
Waking question, should we feel? Is it real? Is it real?
So you can hear that the finalized mix is a lot punchier. It's a lot fuller than the rough mix here, which is exactly what we would expect. What we can do here is we can select sections to go on repeat, or as the song was playing, you could see that I could toggle where about I am in the reference mix relative to the original mix here. And of course, perhaps the most important feature of the reference to is the level matching capabilities. Remember what I said about the loudness bias and humans tending to prefer the louder option of two options in an A/B test. The reference to automatically level matches to the original to whatever track or mix is the quietest. We can also set them all to -14 short-term LUFS, which is streaming level for many streaming services. And we can do that to single tracks or all tracks if we have multiple reference mixes within the plugin here. So we are going to match to the original, and I will just toggle back a few times and play around with this so you can get a better idea of how it works.
Work of fiction, and only you approve it. Regardless of all the, what's the point when only you approve it?
You can see the differences in frequencies here are rather pronounced.
That the book I needed hasn't been read.
So to match the frequency content, we would have to bring our mix down significantly in the mid-range, up significantly in the low and the high frequencies. We'll just show that one more time here.
Not yet.
So we would have to, on the mix bus or in our individual tracks,
Sunlight.
do this curve in EQ to kind of match to whatever the reference mix is. So there's a lot that you can do with reference mixes, and this plugin is super powerful for getting not only things done quickly, but also getting a visual representation of how your original mix stacks up against whatever references you choose to use within it. So with that brief explanation, let's now hop out of Logic Pro. Beyond referencing within the mix session, where we have direct control over the mix, it's also important to reference our mixes outside the studio. While A being our mix against the reference can be much more difficult outside the studio, it's still invaluable to take our mix outside the studio and listen to it in places like the car, in the home stereo system, in our earbuds, and hear how it compares to our reference mixes in these new environments. We should do our best to ensure that we are listening at similar levels when referencing our mix against our reference tracks inside the studio and also especially outside the studio. I have a video about increasing the loudness of our mix to make it more competitive with our references outside the studio. I'll leave a link to that in the description box below. So there you have it. Using reference tracks is an excellent way to improve your mixes by setting a direct goalpost to mix toward. Do your best to make your mix sound on par with your references, but don't be discouraged if you don't get there, especially in the early days of mixing. Remember that we are choosing reference tracks because they sound great, and these tracks have been mixed and mastered oftentimes by professionals with years and decades of experience. So they make for great goalposts to work toward, but don't be discouraged if you can't get there in your mixes. Just keep working and you will get better. As always, I would like to thank you for being here on the My New Microphone YouTube channel. We are just getting started and I'm glad to have you with us. There are plenty of resources I've included in the description box below, and on this end screen, I will feature a few videos that I think you may want to check out here on YouTube. Keep up the great work, and I will see you in the next one.